Today I got a record high of a 98 sleep score on my Garmin Fenix 7S Pro, and on my Galaxy Watch I did not get a record high, but only for comparison already and for redundant data I got an 86. So first of all I want to kind of explain how Garmin makes the sleep score, then I want to go into my hypothesis why I had a very above average sleep score for me, and then I want to add some more data to this, also because I want to keep this in a style of basically a note. This should be as neutral as possible in order to not now have already baked in conclusions that would be also likely to be false. So first of all, Garmin calculates the sleep score like this. So we have these different things Garmin says that are important, and so it ranks the sleep according to this. We have in total a couple of different factors. The first is duration, stress, deep, light, and REM. Now, in terms of the duration, anything that is sleep less than your sleep need, which is calculated on the Garmin device, will result in a lower sleep score. In terms of stress, sleeping with a 15 or lower, so sleeping with a sleep score of a stress score of 15 or lower is considered ideal, and anything higher in terms of the stress score will be reducing your sleep score. The next is the deep sleep. So deep sleep should be 16 to 33% of total sleep. Less deep sleep will lower your sleep score. The next is the light, 30 to 64% of total sleep. More or less light sleep will lower your sleep score. Then we also have the REM, 21 to 31% of total sleep. More or less REM sleep will lower your sleep score. And we also have awake and restlessness, so 5 or fewer restless moments while the same hour for a high quality sleep score. 1 or fewer awake moments that last over 5 minutes and less than 20 minutes total spent time awake throughout your sleep window. So apparently I hit an excellent on all of these markers, which you can see here. So because all of these markers are excellent, the overall sleep score now seems to be very excellent. Now for reference, I might give you basically my sleep score on the yearly, not average, but at least the yearly data. It does not give a yearly average, at least in terms of Garmin. We have the average highest score and we have the average lowest score. But you can see that it is usually in between anywhere from 50 to 75 for me. Now already a few caveats. Often the sleep is not properly tracked on my Garmin device. Now I have a few assumptions why that could be the case. One of the leading ones is that I often sleep on my stomach with my wrists kind of like this or like this. And so as basically the device is pressed against my wrist very tightly and it can also not move very much, this often causes, I think, the sleep not to be tracked properly. But I often sleep in this position, so I don't really know what to do about this. Now, out of the sleep scores it got these. Now for reference already, I might introduce here again the sleep scores on the Galaxy Watch. I wore a Galaxy Watch or an Active 2, so currently I have the Galaxy Watch 4. I previously had the Active 2 and previously I wore a Galaxy Fit. And so all of these devices only the watches recorded sleep score. The Galaxy Fit only recorded something that was sleep efficiency, which is basically how much time in bed you went, or not, how much time in bed you were actually asleep. And I wanted to pause, but since I'm recording on my phone, this didn't work. So I would show you my sleep score on Samsung Health, but there seems to be a bug that has been lasting for now months, where it just doesn't show the data. It takes 2 or 3 minutes to load. So I will already go into the kind of things I thought that might have contributed, or think that might have contributed to this higher sleep score. Now, in order to assess this properly, I think I need to also kind of discuss the baseline. My baseline is that I stand up, then I do either already some kind of work, or I then already work out. So I try to work out more in the morning. I usually work out once in a given day, and that's kind of maybe 30 to 40 minutes of core time. It also could be higher. Sometimes it's 90 minutes or something like this. Now I do this every single day, and yesterday I also trained more or less in the morning, but so I woke up yesterday I think at 5:50, and then I trained at beginning from 6:30 or something like this, or 6:40. Now, this seems to be kind of the sweet spot, at least in terms of my sleep schedule and in terms of when to train. Now, what also has to be noted is that it is the middle of summer, so training in the morning also seems to be more useful, as basically I can train at a lower temperature, because the gym temperature inside is also kind of partially dependent on the outside temperature, as in the morning the windows, for example, are open, whereas during the day then it often might already be higher in terms of the temperature. Now this workout yesterday was, I think, fairly fine. It was a strength training yesterday, and so it also seems to be a relation that on these training days, where I basically have in total lower cardiovascular stress and maybe also cardiorespiratory stress, so I basically only have it's a resistance training. So I don't have as high as of a cardiovascular stress as I would have if I did have a cardiovascular workout more. Of course, there is also a slight portion of cardiovascular activity, and usually the resistance training for me results in 200 to 300 calories after a duration of 35 to 40 minutes now. And yesterday I then went to a library in order to work there instead of here. And so in the library it is cooled, which is, I think, or which might have reduced the stress. Additionally, I forgot the adapter for my keyboard, which meant that I had to sit down on one of these PCs or work on my notebook, which is a deviation in the following way. I usually try to stand all day. And since I didn't stand all day, this already might have reduced my stress. Now, additionally, 2 or 3 days before now, I ate quite a lot, and I also introduced more carbs, not very intentionally, but this kind of just happened, and I also accepted it. So I also ate lots of fruit. Why does this maybe contribute to the higher sleep score? What I think is that I kind of overconsumed, and so this might have led the next day into basically higher, maybe potentially higher leptin signaling, which meant that I was less hungry, or which could have meant that I was less hungry. And I actually was less hungry yesterday. So the only thing I ate yesterday was my supplements in the morning. Then I had a shake from vegan plant protein, about 400 calories for the entire shake. And then I had an additional half of a shake in the late afternoon. So in total, I had probably around 600 to 700 kilocalories yesterday. In addition, I trained in the morning, and so therefore the time in between my bedtime as well as my training was kind of maximally extended. And in addition, I was basically as fasted as I somehow could have been, compared, or at least if I just ate on a day, compared to trying to force fast. Now, what I've recently been doing is I try to basically only fast whenever my body just doesn't want to eat, and that has been true for yesterday. So because I now try to eat more based on hunger, yesterday I just wasn't that hungry, probably also because I had maybe higher leptin, or maybe also higher body fat from the days before, or from 2 days before. So yesterday I basically sat all day, and in between I also had a nap in the middle of the day. And so I also tried to, so when I have the system running where I basically nap multiple times during the day, which might not necessarily mean that I'm asleep, but it seems to kind of replenish my mental resources quite a bit. And so this is also what I did yesterday. So basically, when I then finally drove home from the library with the bike, also kind of very low stress activity because I just couldn't drive faster. And so I basically had a somewhat of a reasonable high arc in the morning, I would say, and then it was all the way down in terms of food, but also in terms of stress. So basically I sat all day, which is quite unusual for me. I also didn't have that much stress, I think, during the day. Now I could also look this up on Garmin, which I will do shortly. So this is the day yesterday. In total, a 17 in terms of average sleep, not average sleep, but average stress. So 12 hours and 30 minutes at rest, 2 hours and 3 minutes low, and then we have 55 minutes at medium and 15 minutes at high, which is, I don't know what it is, but let's just take a look at the yearly average. And so it seems to be, well, in the average. If we take a look at the last 7 days, then it seems to be kind of on the lower side in terms of the overall stress. I think having data like this is a little bit more useful compared to just anecdotes of me telling you, okay, I sat down all day long. Now, over the last couple of years, it seemed to be that I often have kind of the at least highest sleep scores if I have a day in which I don't eat that much. And I also basically mostly ate protein powder yesterday, or meal shakes. And so there also has probably not that much been in terms of digestion stress. so this might also have contributed to this. Now I also want to mention that I'm kind of at a lower weight compared to maybe the year before. So we can take the, again, yearly average in this case, but it also in this case only lasts until March, because, well, in Garmin I at least don't have the data. So we can see that I'm in a lower weight. The question is, of course, does the lower weight also result in a lower body fat? And this is what we can see here. I also can take a look at the same data in Samsung, but I saw now that here we have the sleep score on the yearly average in terms of Samsung Health. And so we can see that the yearly average is a 72. So if I just compare these two, then Garmin usually seems to be at least 5 points or 10 points lower compared to the sleep score in Samsung Health, but I don't have a yearly average or even monthly average readout. I think there is a monthly readout if I'm not mistaken. So let's take a look at the monthly readout of the... No, also here we have just the average highest and the average lowest score, but keep in mind that many of these sleep scores are actually not that accurate because, well, Garmin didn't even catch my sleep properly. So also in the last 7 days, we actually have an average sleep score, which in this case is a 76. Now, what I wanted to mention in Samsung was the additional weight, since I did previously synchronize my weight to Samsung on a different scale, and this I do not have in Garmin. Let's take a look at the body composition in Samsung. So first of all, the weight graph looks like this, somewhat similar to Garmin, because the weight has also been synchronized to Garmin. It is just that the body fat has not been synchronized to Garmin. We can also see that Garmin, not Garmin, but Samsung here, synchronizes the weight a little bit different, not synchronizes, it has this display which exaggerates the data a little bit more compared to Garmin. So if we take a look at the body fat, then we can see that the body fat is also kind of on the lower side, at least as of now. Actually, it is the lowest of the last year, with an average of 15.8%. And so it seems to also be the case that I tend to sleep better, at least approximated by the sleep scores, if my body fat is a little bit lower compared to higher. Could also be due to other things, like if I am higher in body fat, then I might also in this period of time have eaten more, and this eating more might cause more metabolic stress in terms of, or let's just call it digestion stress or food ingestion stress. Now, the next thing I want to discuss is the different metrics I have, at least in terms of Garmin. And so I'm currently in recovery. So the metrics I have is mostly the glances I arranged here. So we can first of all take a look at all of these, and then I will go through them. So first of all, I have currently a training status of recovery, which also kind of seems to match this. Okay, I'm not as stressed right now, and also not in terms of training. So then we also see that I don't have a load that is actually appropriate in terms of the high aerobic zone. I also have a load ratio currently of 0.5, which I'm not that proud of, but it seems to be that I cannot really train harder as of currently. Then the weight, we already took a look at. The blood pressure has normalized after now about a year of being quite high. So this is the data of the last year. I do measure my blood pressure every day in the morning. I also did some measurements in the evening. I also switched from the Omron Evolve to the Garmin Index S2 in order to, not Index S2, the Garmin BPM. The Index S2 is the scale Garmin provides, which I also have. And so the body composition data is from the Garmin Index S2. And so we can see that my blood pressure has normalized. And what is also somewhat obvious, I think, not obvious, it seems to be that with higher blood pressure, or with higher weight maybe, also higher weight seems to correlate, or higher body fat maybe also seem to correlate with higher blood pressure. And so as my blood pressure has normalized, my weight has also normalized. Now, not necessarily causal, but also interesting. Then my HRV has been quite high, I would say. So this is now the 4 weeks, the last 4 weeks. And in the last 4 weeks, we had a sleep average of 86 milliseconds. Now, if I take a look at a sample data from maybe only March of the same year, so this would be now 4 or 5 months ago, then this is what it looked like. So the range is fairly different, and the average here is 41. And this, so we can actually take a look at the beginning of when I got my Garmin watch 1.5 years ago. I got the 6S Pro first, and then I switched a year later to the 7S Pro. So in the beginning, my sleep average was, now every time this is for 4 weeks, which is basically a full month, but also the rolling month, not the calendar months. months. So we have a 41, then we have a 47, then we have a 42. These are always the averages for the entire month. Then we have a 55, a 49, a 54, a 58, a 55, a 50, and it goes on and on. So I'm quite high, I would say. It's almost a doubling of my HOV, at least in the last couple of weeks. Now also the low training load might contribute to this because, well, the higher the training load, the potentially latently lower the HOV also seems to be. In terms of my Garmin VO2 max estimate, it is kind of close to the highest it has ever been at 57, but it has been for multiple months now. And so it actually very shortly was at 58, but then dropped down again because I didn't run as fast as Garmin thought I should run. And so, yeah, well, so much about the VO2 max. My VO2 max is also the highest it has ever been, as recorded on either Garmin or on a Samsung Health device. So the Samsung Health Active 2, not Samsung Health, but the Samsung Galaxy Active 2 as well as the Galaxy Watch 4, both had their estimates when I still tracked my workouts on the Galaxy Watch. Currently I do track them here and then I synchronize them with an app called Health Sync over to Samsung Health, which also means that Samsung Health now currently does not have the VO2 max estimates, which it also calculates. And from the Galaxy Watch 4, for example, when I started out, not the Galaxy Watch 4, but the Galaxy Active 2, I think in 2020, the highest it has ever been on a Samsung Health, I started at a 54. And so it has also not changed over the years that much. It has been quite lower in between, but now it is at 57. Now we could take a look at also the yearly resting heart rate if Garmin didn't decide to randomly take this out. Maybe this is a bug, but up until like 2 or 3 days ago, my yearly resting heart rate was a 49. What is also noteworthy, I think, is that yesterday I had a sleeping heart rate of 38 or 37, which I can also see probably in the data. I mean, I could also have it on my watch, but I usually just access it on my phone, but I usually just access it on my watch. So we can see that it at least was a 39. I think at the beginning of the day it showed a 37, but of course now the time has gone on. So this is the resting heart rate of the last 7 days, which is also fairly on the lower side, I would say. So currently the 7-day resting heart rate average is a 40, which is somewhat reasonably low, I would say. Garmin, not Garmin, but Andy Galpin, not to be confused with Andy Garmin, recently mentioned somewhere that usually a very high, endurance athletes that are kind of very good endurance athletes often are in the range of the high 30s in terms of the resting heart rate. So I seem to be approaching kind of this territory, which is nice. But of course, if I take the yearly average again, 49 is not that low. It has only been as of the last couple of weeks, which can also be seen in the data as the lower heart rate. You can see here the blue is kind of dropping off, not really dropping off, but it is a little bit below. Of course now, because there is also the high heart rate in there, it is also not that visible. Now, what else is there to say? I recently again began tracking my calories, and this has now been 2 weeks where I kind of have been tracking all of the calories, which was also fairly informative. In the last couple of weeks and months, I try to more and more replace my food with meal shakes, which means that I might have a third to half of my calories in terms of the meal shakes. Mostly the meal shakes are vegan protein powder plus something else, which might be some vegetable powder or something similar to this. And the rest is also not that. So I do have a Garmin Fitness Age, which also might be useful to include in here. My body fat seems to, so it says maintain 13.2%, which seems to be the average. I think the 13.2% is actually just the measurement as of today. And so this would not be that useful for something. I actually thought it was about the last 7 days, but I currently am not sure. In terms of the body fat, as of today, it showed me a 13.2, but the yearly body fat average is 15.8 on the Garmin device, but you also saw the body fat increase and decrease again, so I'm currently kind of on the lower side of the year, the lower half of the year, actually, if you take a look at the graph. Now I also have a body fat or a body composition measurement on an InBody scale, which is the InBody 270. And so if I take a look at this, then the last measurement was of last Saturday, a weight of 72.7 kilograms. and I there had a muscle mass, skeletal muscle mass to say, not the other part, which would also include smooth musculature. And so here we have 38.1 kilograms, a body fat mass of 5.7 kilograms, and this puts me at a body fat percentage of 7.9%, at least as of the last measurement here, which you can also see here. So it seems to be the case that the Garmin index has or ranks me higher in terms of the body fat. In this case, the difference is 7.9, so we have a 5% difference. What is there to note in terms of the sleep setup? I 1.5 years ago got a cooling pad on my mattress, but yesterday it also had 30 degrees. And so this is not an 8 sleep, but it's a device that is somewhat similar, but it only costs 150 or 100 and actually I think only cost 90 euros or something like this. So this device is not that powerful, but I still have it on. I also don't have the additional fan on, which means that it only has kind of a low grade, it removes low grade a little bit of heat from my body. And so this also seems to contribute to basically better sleep. Also subjective, as I today also don't feel that great, I would have to say. So I'm just not that there, which is also apparent, I think, in the style of speaking. Which also means that the sleep scores often don't correlate with my subjective feeling of, well, of readiness. I tried to sleep in a dark room. Yesterday it had still 30 degrees, but since I did not eat all day, there seems to be a lowering in body temperature, which I now also can kind of estimate by taking a look at the Garmin skin temperature. I don't think Garmin has a readout of the skin temperature, but I can see it on my watch. So the skin temperature shows on my watch face, which is a watch face called Glance Pro. And so you can see the skin temperature on the lower left. And if that is below 30 degrees, that seems to be usually kind of very good. And if I fast for longer time, then, or if I just, it does not have to be fasting, but I have to be in a caloric deficit for quite some time, and then the skin temperature seems to be lowering. Garmin also now has this feature on the watches where, so Garmin has the IQ Connect store, and in there you find a glance or a metric which is body temperature estimate. And so I can take a look at this body temperature estimate, but it is not recorded in the data. I could only take a look at the data in terms of the deviation. If I take a look at the sleep metric again, but because my apartment is also not that cooled and because the outdoor temperature was higher, so in here we have an average skin temperature change of plus 0.2, but I would assume that my skin temperature actually was lower. I also might have to mention that when I got back from the library yesterday, I did an additional walk for maybe 20 to 30 minutes, which might also have contributed. So if I additionally eat not, so if I don't eat in the evening, which I basically didn't do, so I ate around maybe 4 in the afternoon, and then I went to bed at 9 yesterday, and I woke up today at 5:30 or something like this, or 4:50 or something like this, I can't quite remember. So whenever I have a little bit of low-level activity, this could be an additional walk. This also seems to greatly contribute sleep score, or seems to correlate with a positive sleep score.